Ignorance isn't just the lack of knowledge. It's a weapon used by systems to keep people down, to keep people blind. And I was one of the blind for a long time, not because I wanted to be, but because that's what I was taught to be. You see, I wasn't born powerless. None of us are. But the world around me, the neighborhoods I lived in, the schools I never really went to, the so-called justice system, they all painted a picture of me before I even had a chance to pick up a brush. They told me, this is who you are, a hustler, a dropout, a number in a file, a threat before I ever became a man. The way I was spoken to harsh, dismissive, impatient. The way I was taught or not taught, I was passed through the system without ever being truly seen. The way I was looked at like I didn't matter, like I was already guilty. Every message around me screamed one thing: you can't, you won't, you never will. And for a while, I believed it. I took their judgment and wore it like a uniform. I believed I was only what the streets made me. I believed I couldn't achieve, so I stopped trying. I believed I wasn't intelligent, so I stopped learning. I was alive, yes, but I wasn't living. I was surviving. But then came the silence, the stillness, the cold metal of a prison cell. When you hit bottom, real bottom, there are only two choices: sink deeper or rise. And something in me refused to sink any lower. Something in me, call it pride, call it purpose, said, enough. And that's when I reached up, that's when I reached inward, that's when I reached for knowledge. You've heard the story. I began by reading, not because I was a scholar, but because I was starving. My mind had been malnourished my whole life. I picked up a dictionary, a big, thick one, and started copying it, word by word, page by page, night after night. My hand cramped, my eyes blurred, but I kept going. Why? Because for the first time in my life, I was reclaiming something that had always been mine, my right to understand. I didn't just learn definitions, I learned context, I learned depth, I learned that language was more than communication, it was power, it was identity, it was liberation. I read about history, not the whitewashed fairy tales they taught in schools, but real history, the rise and fall of empires, the legacy of African civilizations, the philosophies of resistance, the crimes hidden beneath the surface of progress. I read about politics, religion, economics. I read speeches, manifestos, scriptures. Every page was a revelation. Every book was a mirror showing me not just the world, but myself. And I started to see. I started to see how ignorance had been weaponized, how my people, our people, had been systematically deprived of knowledge, how schools had failed us not by accident, but by design, how prisons weren't just buildings, they were blueprints for control. Ignorance isn't just about being uninformed, it's about being manipulated. When you don't know who you are, you become easy to control. When you don't know your history, you become easy to erase. And when you finally start waking up, truly waking up, you realize that the world is not what it pretends to be. You realize how deep the deception runs. And once you recognize that, you can't go back. It's painful. Yes, enlightenment is not comfortable. It is not convenient, but it is necessary. So if you're listening to this and you think you're powerless, hear me. You are not powerless. You are simply unaware of your power. Power doesn't come from money. It doesn't come from titles. It doesn't even come from being free. Real power, lasting power, comes from knowing who you are, from building your mind, from sharpening your soul. Feed your mind. Challenge your beliefs. Question everything. Don't let anyone else define your limits. Don't let anyone else write your story. Ignorance is a prison, but truth is your key. And the most dangerous man is not the one who fights with his fists. It's the one who fights with his mind. Let them fear your mind. Let them tremble at your clarity. Let them see what happens when the so-called powerless finally awaken. Because once you wake up, truly wake up, the world can never put you back to sleep. Remember, you were never powerless. You were only taught to forget your power. Now go and reclaim it. This is Malcolm X. And I speak not as a man who was always wise, but as a man who learned the hard way and found his power in the truth.